The light in the restaurant is low, golden, and forgiving. It's the kind of light that makes everyone look like a fond memory. It spills across the white linen tablecloths, catches in the crystal of the water glasses, and warms the dark wood of the paneled walls. From here, I can smell the sea, a clean, briny scent carried on the evening breeze through the open terrace doors. I can hear the gentle clink of silverware on porcelain, the murmur of hushed conversations, the distant, rhythmic sigh of the waves against the shore. This place, the Cypress Grove, has always been a symphony of quiet elegance. It was our place. Mine and Mark's. It was where we came for our first anniversary, our 5th, our 10th. It was where we honeymooned, promising a forever that felt as solid and timeless as the ancient cypress trees that gave the hotel its name. Tonight he's here. I knew he would be. He's sitting at our table, the one in the corner with the perfect view of the sunset over the ocean. Our table. He's not alone. Her name is Jessica. I know her name. I know the shade of her lipstick and the way she laughs, a little too loudly, when she thinks someone important is watching. Right now, she's leaning forward, her blonde hair catching that golden, forgiving light, and she's smiling at my husband. My husband is smiling back. It's his easy, charming smile, the one that made me fall in love, the one that sealed business deals, the one that convinced my father to give him a loan for our first house. It's a liar's smile. I feel a strange calm settle over me, as cold and heavy as a stone at the bottom of a well. My heart isn't racing. My hands aren't shaking. I'm just watching them, a ghost at my own feast. The man beside me, Mr. Finch, the owner of this entire coastal paradise, places a reassuring hand on my arm. His touch is light, fatherly. He's in his late 60s, with eyes that have seen enough deals sour and hearts break to recognize the quiet devastation in a woman's posture. "Are you ready, Clara?" he asks, his voice a low rumble. I take a breath, the air thick with the scent of expensive perfume and grilled sea bass. I look at Mark, at his hand reaching across the table to cover hers. The same hand that held mine when I was in labor with our daughter. The same hand that I held as my mother's casket was lowered into the ground. A flicker of something hot and violent lances through the cold calm. It's not just about the cheating.
It was never just about that.
It's about the desecration. He brought her here. To our sanctuary. To the place where our forever began. He is trying to erase me, to overwrite our history with her. He thinks I'm a ghost. He's about to find out that ghosts can haunt you in the most unexpected ways. I give Mr. Finch a small, tight nod. I'm ready, I say, and my voice doesn't even tremble. Let's begin. If you've ever had a place that was sacred to you, a place that held the best parts of your story, let me know in the comments where it is. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Knowing you're out there helps more than you can imagine. Just 3 years ago, this moment would have been unthinkable. My life was a meticulously curated collection of happy moments. I had Mark, the brilliant, ambitious architect who could charm a city council into approving a skyscraper and still remember to bring me a latte, extra foam, just the way I liked it. We had Lily, our 7-year-old daughter, a whirlwind of paint-stained fingers and joyful chaos. We had the house in the suburbs, the one with the big oak tree in the front yard that Lily was convinced was a doorway to a fairy kingdom. My life was good. It was comfortable. It was everything I thought I wanted. Mark was the center of that universe. He was the sun, and Lily and I were happy planets orbiting in his warm, brilliant glow. His work was demanding. Late nights at the office, business trips, dinners with clients that I wasn't invited to. I understood. I was his partner, his support system. I managed the house, Lily's school schedule, the carpools, the parent-teacher conferences. I was the CEO of our domestic life, so he could be the star in the corporate world. I took pride in it. I'd see him walk in the door, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, and I'd have his favorite meal ready. I'd listen to him vent about impossible deadlines and incompetent colleagues, and I'd tell him he was a genius, that they were lucky to have him. And he would look at me with such gratitude, his eyes softening. "What would I do without you, Clara?" he'd say, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive cologne and city air. And I would melt, because I needed to be needed by him. Our life was built on these small rituals, these unspoken agreements. We were a team, the perfect team. Or so I believed. The Cypress Grove was the symbol of that team. It wasn't just a hotel, it was a promise. On our honeymoon, we sat on the balcony of our suite, the very one he's probably in right now with her, and we watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He'd turned to me, his face serious in the fading light. "This is it, Clara," he'd said, taking my hand. "This is our place. Whenever life gets crazy, whenever we need to remember what matters, we come back here." Just us, we kept that promise. Every few years, we'd escape for a long weekend. We'd walk the same stretch of private beach, have dinner at the same corner table, order the same bottle of wine. It was our ritual of renewal. It was where we recharged our marriage, where we remembered the two young kids who fell in love before mortgages and responsibilities. The last time we were there was for our 10th anniversary, a year and a half ago. It was perfect. He'd filled the room with my favorite flowers, stargazer lilies. He'd commissioned a piece of jewelry for me, a simple gold necklace with a pendant shaped like a cypress leaf. "So you can always have a piece of our place with you," he'd whispered as he fastened it around my neck. I haven't taken it off since. It rests against my skin now, a cold, mocking weight. The first crack in my perfect world was almost invisible. It wasn't a dramatic discovery, no lipstick on his collar or a suspicious late-night phone call. It was quieter, more insidious. It was a change in the air, a shift in the emotional climate of our home. It started with his phone. For 10 years, his phone had been communal property. It lay on the kitchen counter, on the nightstand, in the car's cup holder. I'd pick it up to check the weather or answer a call if my hands were full. Suddenly, it was an extension of his body. It was always in his pocket or face down on the table. If I so much as glanced at it, he'd snatch it up. "Just a work thing," he'd say, his voice a little too casual. Then came the work dinners that stretched later and later into the night, and the weekend conferences that seemed to pop up with increasing frequency. When he came home, he smelled different. Not of another woman's perfume, but of an absence of me. He smelled of a life I had no part in. I'd try to talk to him. I'd wait until Lily was asleep, the house quiet around us. "Mark, is everything okay?" I'd ask, my voice small. "You seem so distant lately," he would sigh, a long, weary sound, and run a hand through his hair. "I'm just stressed, Clara. This new project is killing me. You have no idea the pressure I'm under." He would make me feel guilty for adding to his burden. He was the master of it, turning my concern into a complaint, my worry into a weakness. And I, the ever-supportive wife, would back down. I'd make him a cup of tea, rub his shoulders, and tell him it would all be okay. I'd tell myself I was being paranoid, insecure. I was a stay-at-home mom. Of course his world seemed more exciting than mine. Of course I felt a little left behind. It was my problem, not his. So I doubled my efforts. I tried to be more interesting, more beautiful, more supportive. I got a new haircut. I started working out again. I suggested date nights, but he was always too tired, too busy. It was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. The more I poured in, the emptier it became. The real inciting incident, the moment the crack shattered into a million irreparable pieces, happened on a Tuesday. It was a ridiculously normal day. I'd just picked Lily up from school. She was excitedly telling me about the volcano she'd made in science class, her hands still smudged with red paint. I was sorting through the mail, a stack of bills and junk circulars. And then I saw it, a credit card statement. It was from a card I didn't know we had. We had our joint account, our savings, his business card. This was different. It was addressed only to him from a bank we didn't use. My first thought was identity theft. My heart started to beat a little faster. I slit the envelope open with my thumb, my hands suddenly clumsy. And there it was. Not fraudulent charges from a stranger, but a meticulous record of his secret life. A life I was not a part of. There were charges for dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, for amounts far too large for one person. There were charges from a high-end lingerie store. A sudden, cold nausea washed over me. I felt the blood drain from my face. Lily was still chattering beside me. And then, Mommy, it exploded. It was so cool. I couldn't breathe. I scrolled down the list of transactions, my eyes blurring with tears I refused to let fall. And then I saw the charge that stopped my heart. The Cypress Grove. A charge for 2 nights in a deluxe ocean view suite. The date was from a month ago. A weekend he was supposed to have been at a mandatory leadership retreat in the mountains. He took her there. He took her to our place. The statement fluttered from my fingers and landed on the kitchen floor. Lily looked up at me, her smile fading. Mommy, are you okay? I looked at my daughter, her face a perfect blend of mine and his, and I felt a rage so pure and so powerful it scared me. It wasn't just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of our family, of the life we had built, of the promises that were supposed to be as solid as the oak tree in our yard. In that moment, the good, supportive, understanding Clara died. And someone else, someone colder and harder, began to take her place. The first few days were a blur of numb disbelief. I functioned on autopilot. I made Lily's lunch. I drove her to soccer practice. I read her bedtime stories. But I was a ghost in my own life. My body was going through the motions, but my mind was trapped in a cold, dark room, replaying that one line on the credit card statement over and over again. The Cypress Grove. The Cypress Grove. The Cypress Grove. It was a mantra of betrayal. I didn't confront him immediately. What would I say? I found your secret credit card statement and saw you took another woman to our honeymoon hotel? I knew what he would do. He would lie. He would twist it, turn it around on me. He'd claim it was a business expense he'd forgotten to file, that a client had stayed there. He'd accuse me of snooping, of invading his privacy, of being crazy and paranoid. He had an answer for everything. He always did. So I waited. I watched him. I studied him like a scientist studying a dangerous, unpredictable specimen. I saw the small tells I'd been blind to before. The way he angled his body away from me when he was texting. The quick, nervous glance he'd give his phone when it buzzed. The forced enthusiasm in his voice when he asked about my day, his eyes already somewhere else. It was a performance, and I had been his most devoted audience. Now, I was a critic sitting in the front row, seeing all the cheap props and missed cues. My first attempt to reclaim any sense of control was clumsy. I started digging. Late at night, after he was asleep, his soft snores a sound that now filled me with revulsion, I would creep out of our bed. I'd go to his office, my heart pounding in my chest, feeling like a burglar in my own home. I went through his computer, his files, his briefcase. I was looking for a name, a face, anything to give substance to the phantom who was haunting my marriage. But he was smart. He was meticulous. His digital life was scrubbed clean.
No suspicious emails, no hidden folders.
It was as if he knew I'd be looking. It made me feel small and foolish. The struggle was internal, a silent, vicious war fought within the confines of my own mind. One moment, I'd be consumed by a white-hot rage, fantasizing about packing his bags and throwing them onto the perfectly manicured lawn. The next, I'd be drowning in a sea of grief, sobbing in the shower so he wouldn't hear, mourning the man I thought I had married, the life I thought I had. The memories were the worst part. They were landmines. A song on the radio would transport me back to our first dance. The smell of sawdust would remind me of him building Lily's bookshelf. Every corner of our home, every shared joke, every cherished tradition was now tainted. He had poisoned the well of our shared history. I started losing weight. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing.
Who was she?
Was she younger? Prettier? More successful? Did he love her? The not knowing was a special kind of torture. It allowed my imagination to conjure up 1,000 different scenarios, each one more painful than the last. I felt like I was losing my mind. The world seemed to have tilted on its axis, and I was sliding off. I decided to confront him, but not with the evidence. I tried a different tactic. I tried to appeal to the man I married, the man I hoped was still in there somewhere. One night, I made his favorite dinner. I opened a bottle of the wine we'd had on our honeymoon. I tried to recreate the magic. He sat across from me, picking at his food, his eyes on his phone. "Mark," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I feel like we're drifting apart. I miss you. I miss us." He didn't look up. He just sighed that same, weary sigh. "Clara, not this again. I told you, work is insane. I just don't have the bandwidth for a big emotional conversation right now." "This isn't a big emotional conversation," I pleaded. "This is our marriage. Don't you care?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes were cold. There was no warmth, no recognition. It was like looking at a stranger. "Of course I care," he said, his voice flat. "But I also have to provide for this family. A roof over your head and lilies doesn't just appear out of thin air. Maybe you could try being a little more supportive and a little less needy." The word hit me like a slap. All those years of putting his needs first, of sacrificing my own ambitions to support his, of building our entire life around his career, and I was needy. That night, I didn't cry. I lay in bed, feeling the chasm between us grow wider and colder. The grief was still there, but it was hardening, crystallizing into something else. Something sharper. Something that felt dangerously like resolve. The fight was just beginning, and I was done being a ghost in my own life. I was done being supportive. I was done being weak. I just didn't know what to do next. My search for answers became an obsession. The anger was a fuel, burning away the fog of grief and replacing it with a cold, clear purpose. I needed a name. I needed a face. I needed to understand the scope of the battlefield before I could plan my attack. I hired a private investigator. It felt like a cliché, a scene from a bad movie. I met him in a sterile coffee shop downtown, a man named Frank who was paunchy and balding and looked more like a disappointed accountant than a hard-boiled detective. But his eyes were sharp, and he listened to my story without a hint of pity, which I was grateful for. I gave him everything I had. The credit card statement, Mark's work schedule, a list of his colleagues. "Find her," I said, my voice steady. "And find out everything you can about their connection." The waiting was agony. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach would clench. I lived in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of my life while a part of me was out there, in the shadows with Frank, uncovering the ugly truth. During this time, Mark became even more distant, more arrogant. He treated my presence in our home as an inconvenience, my questions about his day as an interrogation. He was building a wall around himself, brick by brick, and I was on the outside. He started talking about money. He'd leave bank statements out on the counter, subtly highlighting our expenses. "You know, Clara," he'd say casually, "we really need to tighten our belts. Maybe you should think about getting a part-time job. It would be good for you to get out of the house." It was a calculated move. He was laying the groundwork to control the narrative. He was the responsible provider, and I was the spendthrift wife who didn't appreciate his hard work. He was positioning himself for a divorce, trying to weaken my financial standing before the battle even began. He didn't know I was already arming myself. The call from Frank came 2 weeks later. I was in the grocery store, trying to decide between organic and regular apples, when my phone vibrated. I saw his name, and my hand started to shake. I pushed my cart into a quiet aisle, next to the canned beans. "I have something for you," Frank said, his voice all business. He didn't have to say more. I met him back at the same coffee shop. He slid a manila envelope across the table. It felt heavy, weighted with the truth I both craved and dreaded. I opened it inside my car, the engine off, the air thick with an unspoken finality. There were photographs. Mark, laughing with a woman as they walked out of a restaurant. Mark, his arm around her as they stood on a street corner, waiting for a cab. Mark, kissing her. The woman was beautiful, of course. Blonde, stylish, with a confident smile. But she was also familiar. My blood ran cold. It was Jessica Peterson. She was a junior associate at his firm. I'd met her a handful of times at company holiday parties. She was always bubbly, always praising Mark, telling me how lucky I was to be married to such a visionary. I remembered her shaking my hand, her grip firm, her eyes bright with a sincerity that I now saw was pure performance. The snake. She had been in my home. She had smiled at my daughter. The betrayal wasn't just Mark's. It was hers, too. But that wasn't the worst of it. Frank had dug deeper. The envelope also contained financial documents, bank transfers, emails. It turned out their affair wasn't just a sordid romance.
It was a business partnership.
Mark was planning to leave his firm and start his own architecture company. He was using our joint savings, our retirement funds, funneling money into a secret account to fund his new venture. A venture he planned to start with her. The crown jewel of their future firm was a massive new project, the complete redesign and expansion of a luxury coastal resort. The name of the resort was at the bottom of the proposal document. The Cypress Grove. My breath caught in my chest. It all clicked into place. The trips there weren't just romantic getaways. They were business meetings. He wasn't just cheating on me. He was using our sacred place as the foundation for his new life with her, built with my money. He was stealing my past and my future in one fell swoop. The rage I felt before was a flickering candle compared to the inferno that now consumed me. He wasn't just a cheater. He was a thief. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was trying to break me, to leave me with nothing. I sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot, the photos and documents spread across the passenger seat. The world outside, with its shoppers pushing carts and cars pulling into spaces, seemed impossibly normal. My world had been turned inside out. I looked at the picture of him kissing her, and I didn't feel sadness anymore. I felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. This was no longer a domestic dispute. This was a war. And he had just handed me the map to his entire operation. He thought I was just a wife. He thought I was just a mother. He had no idea who I was about to become. The next few weeks, I was a woman transformed. The grieving wife was gone, replaced by a strategist, a general preparing for battle. I lived a double life. To Mark and Lily, I was the same person, perhaps a little quieter, a little more distant. I made breakfast, I helped with homework, I smiled at the right times. But inside, I was a whirlwind of activity. I gathered my army, which at the time consisted of one person, a divorce attorney named Sarah. She wasn't the type you see on billboards, all smiles and promises. She was sharp, no nonsense, with a reputation for being a shark. When I laid out the manila envelope on her polished mahogany desk, she didn't offer condolences. She just raised an eyebrow and said, "Well, he's ambitious, I'll give him that." And incredibly stupid, those words were a balm to my soul. For the first time, I felt seen. Not as a victim, but as a player in a high-stakes game. Sarah and I spent hours mapping out our strategy. We hired a forensic accountant to trace every dollar Mark had moved. We documented everything. Every lie, every secret trip, every stolen asset. I became a meticulous record keeper, my anger channeled into spreadsheets and timelines. The emotional toll was immense. Some nights, I'd lie awake, the sheer scale of his betrayal threatening to crush me. He had woven a web of lies so intricate, so complete, that I started to question my own sanity, my own memories. Was any of it real? Did he ever love me? I had to compartmentalize. I had to pack those feelings away in a box and put it on a high shelf. There would be time for grief later. Now was the time for action. My midpoint shift, the moment the game truly changed, came from an unexpected place. It wasn't from a legal document or a financial statement. It came from a memory. I was looking through an old photo album, searching for a picture of a joint bank account statement for the accountant. I stumbled upon a photo from our 10th anniversary at the Cypress Grove. In the picture, we were standing on the terrace with an older gentleman. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a kind, weathered face. I remembered him introducing himself as the owner, Mr. Alistair Finch. He'd seen my cypress leaf necklace, which he'd recognized as a custom piece from a local artisan he knew. He'd been charmed by our story, by how much we loved his hotel. We chatted for nearly an hour about the history of the place, his vision for its future. He talked about his late wife, how they had built the hotel together from the ground up. It was his legacy, his heart. He'd given me his personal card. If you ever need anything, he'd said with a warm smile, don't hesitate to call. I had tossed the card into a jewelry box and forgotten about it. Until now, a crazy idea began to form in my mind. It was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary. But what did I have to lose? I found the card. It's elegant, embossed lettering still crisp. Alastair Finch, Chairman, Cypress Grove Holdings. I stared at it for a long time, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mark was trying to build his future on the foundation of this man's legacy, using my money. He was presenting himself as a visionary architect who could take the Cypress Grove to the next level. But he was a fraud. His entire plan was built on a lie. I picked up the phone. My hand was shaking so badly, I could barely dial the number. His assistant answered, her voice polite and professional. I took a deep breath. My name is Clara Wallace, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm an old acquaintance of Mr. Finch's. It's a personal matter. Please tell him I have some information regarding the new resort expansion project. Information I believe he needs to hear. I didn't know if he would remember me. I didn't know if he would even take my call. I was just a guest from a year and a half ago. A nobody. I hung up the phone, my mind racing with doubt. Had I just made a fool of myself? Was this a dead end? 20 minutes later, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered, my throat dry. Clara? Alastair Finch here. My assistant said you called. It's good to hear from you. Now, what's this about my expansion project? In that moment, the entire trajectory of my fight shifted. I was no longer just playing defense, trying to claw back what was mine. I was going on the offensive. I had found a new, powerful ally. And we had a common enemy, the man who was trying to betray us both. The balance of power had just begun to tip. The meeting with Alastair Finch was set for the following week at his corporate office downtown, a sleek, minimalist space with panoramic views of the city. Walking in, I felt a tremor of insecurity. I was a suburban mom in a world of power suits and billion-dollar deals. What was I doing here? But then I thought of Mark's smug face, of Jessica's false smile, of them laughing together in our place, and the insecurity hardened into resolve. I was wearing a simple navy blue dress, the cypress leaf pendant resting against my collarbone. It was my armor. Mr. Finch greeted me himself, his handshake firm, his eyes kind but shrewd.
He remembered me.
He remembered our conversation on the terrace. I always remember the people who truly appreciate the Grove, he said, leading me into his office. It's a family in a way. Now, you said you had information. I didn't waste time with pleasantries or emotional appeals. I laid out the manila envelope on his vast desk, just as I had on my lawyer's. I walked him through it, piece by piece. The secret bank accounts, the stolen funds, the business plan for the new firm, with Jessica Peterson listed as a founding partner. And finally, the proposal for the Cypress Grove expansion project, submitted under the name of Mark's current firm, but which was clearly the intellectual property he intended to steal for his new one. I watched Mr. Finch's face as he absorbed the information. His initial warmth slowly cooled, replaced by a glacial stillness. He picked up the proposal, his long fingers tracing the architectural renderings. He was silent for a long time. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were like chips of ice. He came to me a month ago, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Your husband. He presented this vision. He was charming, brilliant. He sold me a story about legacy, about honoring the past while building the future. He tapped a finger on Jessica's name in the business plan. He introduced this young woman as his star protege. The future of the firm. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on me. He's not just betraying you, Clara. He's trying to use my life's work as a launch pad for a company built on theft. He's a parasite. The validation in his words was so powerful it almost brought me to tears. He saw it. He saw Mark for exactly what he was. This wasn't just my personal heartbreak anymore. It was a business matter. And Mr. Finch was a very, very serious businessman. "What do you want, Clara?" he asked, his tone shifting from anger to strategy. The question hung in the air. I could have asked for anything. I could have asked him to simply kill the deal, to ruin Mark professionally. It would have been justice enough. But as I sat there, in that office high above the city, a new plan began to form, more audacious and more satisfying than simple revenge. I wanted more than to see him fail. I wanted to win. I wanted to take the very thing he was trying to steal and make it my own. "I want the project," I said, my voice clear and strong. He raised an eyebrow. "You're not an architect." "No," I said. "But I have a degree in art history and design. I worked in museum curation for 10 years before I had my daughter. I understand aesthetics, history, and legacy. I understand your hotel better than he ever could, because for me, it wasn't just a business opportunity. It was a promise. I know what makes it special. He wants to turn it into a monument to his own ego. I want to preserve its soul." I leaned forward, my hands clasped on his desk. "His plan is to gut the historic wing. He sees it as outdated, inefficient. That wing is the heart of the hotel. It's where my husband and I spent our honeymoon. It's where you and your wife had your first office. He wants to tear it down. I want to restore it. I want to lead a project that honors the Grove's history, not erases it." I told him my vision, the ideas I had, the respect for the original design that Mark's proposal completely lacked. I was speaking from the heart, but also from a place of deep, intuitive knowledge about what made that place magical. Mr. Finch listened, his expression unreadable. For a terrifying moment, I thought I had overplayed my hand, that he would laugh me out of his office. Instead, a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who has just spotted an opportunity. "He's a fool," Mr. Finch said softly. "He underestimated you. People like that always do. They see a supportive wife, and they think she's a decorative accessory, not the pillar holding up the entire structure." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "All right, Clara. Let's give him a lesson in what happens when you try to build an empire on stolen ground. We're going to let him think his plan is moving forward. We're going to let him get in so deep he can't see the light of day. And then, you and I are going to take it all away from him." The crisis deepened in the weeks that followed, but it was a crisis of my own making. I was playing the most dangerous game of my life. On the surface, I was the dutiful, slightly depressed wife. I let Mark see my sadness, my confusion. I let him believe he was in complete control, that I was weak and falling apart. It was the hardest acting job I've ever had. Every polite smile felt like a lie. Every shared meal was a charade. He would talk about his stressful project, giving me vague, condescending updates, and I would nod and listen, my mind racing with the secret knowledge of what he was really doing. He was liquidating assets, cashing in stocks from a joint account he thought I never checked. The forensic accountant was tracking every move. Each transaction was another nail in his coffin. He was becoming more brazen, more confident in my ignorance. He left his laptop open one evening, a spreadsheet of their new company's budget on the screen. He was planning to buy a condo downtown, a love nest for him and Jessica, paid for with our family's money. I took a picture of the screen with my phone and quietly closed the laptop, my heart a block of ice in my chest. There were close calls. One afternoon, Sarah, my lawyer, called me while Mark was home unexpectedly. I had to pretend it was my sister, discussing a fictional family emergency, my voice high and panicked. Mark looked at me with mild annoyance, more concerned about the interruption to his work than my supposed distress. He was so wrapped up in his own world, so convinced of his own superiority, that he couldn't see what was happening right in front of him. He saw what he wanted to see, a wife who was becoming a footnote in his grand new story. Meanwhile, my alliance with Mr. Finch grew stronger. We met secretly, sometimes at his office, sometimes at a discreet private club. We weren't just business partners. We were co-conspirators. He became a mentor, a father figure. He taught me about contracts, about leverage, about the art of the deal. He connected me with a team of real architects, preservation specialists, and designers who were loyal to him. We began to secretly craft a counterproposal, a new vision for the Cypress Grove that was everything Mark's was not: respectful, elegant, and rooted in the hotel's history. It was my vision, brought to life by a team of experts. I poured all my pain, my love for the old hotel, and my fury into that project. It became my salvation. The deeper we got, the higher the stakes became. Mark scheduled a final presentation with Mr. Finch and the hotel's board of directors. This was the meeting where he expected to get the final green light to secure the funding that would launch his new life. He was ecstatic, on top of the world. The night before the presentation, he was practically vibrating with excitement. He tried to be magnanimous, to play the part of the successful husband. "You know, Clara," he said, pouring himself a celebratory glass of scotch, "once this project is locked in, things are going to change. For the better. I'll finally have the freedom I need. We'll be set for life." I just looked at him, my expression carefully neutral. "That's great, Mark, set for life." He had no idea whose life he was talking about. That night, I didn't sleep. The weight of what was about to happen was crushing. This wasn't just about a divorce or a business deal anymore. It was a complete and total dismantling of a man's life. A life he had built on my back. Was I capable of being that ruthless? I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back was tired, her eyes shadowed with sleepless nights. But she was also someone I hadn't seen in a long time. She was strong. She was focused. She was a survivor. The turning point wasn't a single moment, but a slow, dawning realization. The grief for my lost marriage was finally, truly gone. It had been replaced by a cold, hard certainty. He had made his choices. He had chosen to lie, to steal, to betray. Now I was making mine. I was choosing myself. I was choosing my daughter. I was choosing to fight for my future, not with tears and pleas, but with contracts and consequences. The next day was the day of the presentation. Mark left the house in his best suit, a confident smirk on his face. He kissed Lily goodbye, a perfunctory peck on the head. He glanced at me. "Wish me luck," he said. It wasn't a request. It was a command. "You don't need it," I said, my voice quiet. "You've got it all figured out," he smiled, pleased with my answer. "Damn right I do," he had no idea. As he walked out the door, I picked up my phone and made a call. "Mr. Finch," I said. "It's time." I had made a dinner reservation for 2 at the Cypress Grove for that evening. A table for 1, really, as my dinner companion would be joining me later. I was going to be there when Mark arrived for his celebratory dinner with Jessica. I was going to sit at our table in our restaurant in our place. And I was going to take back everything he had ever stolen from me. The drive to the coast was surreal. The sun was beginning its slow descent, casting long shadows across the highway. I drove with the windows down, letting the cool, salty air whip through my hair. I felt a terrifying sense of calm, the kind that comes before a storm. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared. I was ready. I had spent the afternoon with Lily, taking her to the park, pushing her on the swings until she was breathless with laughter. I held her tight, breathing in the scent of her hair, and promised myself that I was doing this for her, too. I was showing her what a woman does when she is wronged. She doesn't crumble. She rebuilds. I arrived at the Cypress Grove as dusk was settling. The hotel was just as beautiful as I remembered, its white walls glowing in the twilight, the namesake cypress trees standing like ancient sentinels. For a moment, a wave of nostalgia washed over me, a phantom limb of a happy memory. I pushed it away. This place was no longer a shrine to a dead love. It was a boardroom. It was a battlefield. I walked through the lobby, my heels clicking on the cool marble floor. The staff greeted me with polite smiles, none of them recognizing the ghost from their owner's past. I was seated at the table. Our table. The one in the corner, with the perfect view. The waiter asked if I was expecting someone. "Yes," I said. "He'll be here shortly." I ordered a glass of champagne. Not the kind Mark and I used to drink, but a different, better vintage. A vintage for new beginnings. I sat there, sipping my champagne, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. I felt completely, utterly alone, but not lonely. I was self-contained, a universe of one. And then I saw them. They walked into the restaurant, hand in hand. Mark was beaming, his face flushed with triumph. Jessica was clinging to his arm, looking up at him with adoration. They were the picture of a happy, successful couple. They didn't see me at first. The hostess led them towards the center of the room. But Mark, ever the sentimentalist, ever the hypocrite, stopped her. Actually, he said, his voice smooth and confident, I'd like that table in the corner. It's a special 1 inch. The hostess glanced at me, a flicker of confusion on her face. I'm sorry, sir, but that table is occupied. Mark's smile faltered. He followed her gaze, and his eyes met mine. Time seemed to slow down. I watched the sequence of emotions play across his face like a film in slow motion. First, confusion. What was I doing here? Then, a flash of annoyance. How dare I spoil his perfect moment? Then, the dawning, sickening realization that this was not a coincidence. His face went pale. His confident posture collapsed. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Jessica, sensing the shift, looked from him to me, her own smile faltering. Mark? Who is that? She asked, her voice a nervous whisper. He didn't answer. He couldn't speak. He just stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my champagne, holding his gaze over the rim of the glass. I gave him a small, tight smile, the smile of a predator. And then the true climax began. Alastair Finch walked into the restaurant. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored evening jacket, looking every bit the powerful, distinguished owner that he was. He strode across the room with purpose, his eyes fixed on our corner. He ignored Mark completely. He walked right up to my table and pulled out the chair opposite me. Clara, he said, his voice booming slightly in the suddenly quiet restaurant. My apologies for being late. I trust you haven't been waiting long. He sat down, a clear, public declaration of our alliance. The entire restaurant was watching now. The hushed murmurs, the curious glances. It was a theatrical performance, and we were the stars. Mark looked from me to Mr. Finch, his mind struggling to process the impossible scene in front of him. This was the man he had just spent the afternoon dazzling with his brilliance. The man who held his entire future in his hands. And he was sitting with me,
His wife.
the wife he thought was at home, clueless and broken. Mr. Finch, Mark stammered, finally finding his voice. I don't understand. Mr. Finch turned to him, his expression one of mild, dismissive surprise, as if noticing a bug on the wall.
Wallace.
I didn't see you there, he gestured vaguely towards me. I was just congratulating the new creative director for the Cypress Grove redesign project. She has a remarkable vision. Truly remarkable. The plot twist landed in the silent restaurant with the force of a physical blow. Mark's face went from pale to ashen. He physically recoiled, as if he'd been struck. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a horror that was profoundly satisfying to witness. He saw it all in that one devastating moment. He saw the months of planning, the secret meetings, the double life I had been living. He saw that while he was building his castle in the sky, I had been digging a trench around its foundations. He had been so focused on his own brilliance, his own cleverness, that he never once thought to look over his shoulder. He never once considered that the woman he had dismissed as a needy housewife was capable of orchestrating his complete and utter ruin. Jessica was the first to break. Her face crumpled in confusion and betrayal. New creative director? She said, her voice shrill. Mark, what is he talking about? That's our project. Mark didn't answer her. He couldn't. He was a statue, frozen in the wreckage of his own making. He had brought his mistress to our honeymoon spot to celebrate stealing my money to fund a project he was stealing from his company to build a new life, and he had walked straight into a trap laid by his wife and the very man he was trying to swindle. The look on his face wasn't just defeat. It was annihilation. He had been so sure of his victory, so certain of my weakness. And in one single moment, he realized that he had never been in control. He had been a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. I raised my glass in a silent toast.
To him.
to his ambition, to his spectacular, self-inflicted downfall. He had wanted to erase me. Instead, I had replaced him. The aftermath was not a loud explosion, but a quiet, methodical demolition. Mark didn't make a scene in the restaurant. He was too stunned, too broken. He and Jessica simply vanished. One moment they were standing there, the centerpiece of a drama, and the next they were gone, retreating into the night like vanquished ghosts. Mr. Finch and I finished our dinner. We talked about the project, about the future. For the first time in a very long time, I felt a sense of hope, of excitement for what was to come. The next day, the official letters went out. The one from Mr. Finch's company to Mark's firm, formally rejecting their proposal and announcing their new partnership with me as the project lead. The one from my lawyer to Mark, officially filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery and financial fraud, complete with irrefutable proof of his secret accounts and misappropriated funds. The fallout at his firm was immediate and brutal. When they learned he had tried to steal a 9-figure project, along with proprietary designs, to start a competing firm, they fired him and filed a lawsuit. Jessica was fired as well, her career in architecture likely over before it had even truly begun. Mark was ruined, professionally, financially, and personally. He tried to fight, of course. He hired a lawyer. He tried to paint me as a vindictive, scorned woman. But the evidence was overwhelming. The forensic accountant's report was a masterpiece of financial devastation. Every dollar he had stolen was accounted for. He had no leverage, no defense. He had been so arrogant, so sure of his own cleverness, that he'd left a paper trail a mile long. In the divorce settlement, I got everything. The house. Full custody of Lily. A significant portion of his remaining assets as restitution for the funds he had stolen. He was left with nothing but his debts and his shame. He moved into a small, sad apartment across town. I see him sometimes when I'm dropping Lily off at a friend's house. He looks diminished. The charm is gone, replaced by a bitter, haunted look. The brilliant sun that I had orbited for so long had burned out, collapsing into a dark, dense star of regret. My life, on the other hand, began to flourish. The Cypress Grove project became my passion. I moved out of the suburbs and into a beautiful condo by the sea, not far from the hotel. Lily loved it. She was thriving, happy and resilient, too young to understand the full scope of the betrayal but old enough to appreciate the newfound peace in our home. Working with Mr. Finch and his team was a revelation. I discovered a part of myself I thought had died long ago, the creative, intelligent, capable woman who existed before I became Mark's wife. My ideas were valued. My vision was celebrated. I was no longer a support system. I was the architect of my own life. The work was healing. Pouring my energy into restoring the historic wing of the hotel felt like I was restoring my own soul. I was taking something that had been tainted by betrayal and making it beautiful again, making it whole. It's been 2 years now. The renovation is almost complete. The grand reopening is next month. It's more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. It is a testament not to what I lost, but to what I built in its place. I don't hate Mark anymore. Hate is a heavy thing to carry, and I have no room for it in my new life. I feel a kind of distant pity for him. He had so much, and he threw it all away for a cheap imitation of happiness, for an ego that could never be satisfied. He didn't just lose a wife and a family, he lost himself. Sometimes, late at night, I stand on my balcony and look out at the ocean. I touch the cypress leaf pendant, which I still wear. It's no longer a symbol of a broken promise. It's a reminder that sometimes the most beautiful things can be built from the ashes of what was burned to the ground. A reminder that I am not a ghost. I am the owner of my own story. Thanks for being here with me through this. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life, and I'm so grateful for every one of you who listens. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is. It makes the world feel a little smaller.